Blessed to be a part of your day. Kevin Miller in the morning, out to Washington and Newsbusters. Scott Whitlock joining us from Washington, D.C., the Media Research Center, as we're yapping a little bit about coverage. Scott, good to have you with us, sir.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
So let's talk a little bit about this John McCain coverage. The same people that are going after President Trump and talking about how great John McCain is and was are the same people that ripped John McCain. And this is what you guys are always exposing, the hypocrisy of the media.
Oh, yeah, completely. And obviously John McCain had a lot of fans in the media, and there were a lot of people who in the media who appreciated when he would go against his own party. But as soon as he got that nomination in 2008, these same people turned on him. The New York Times wrote a story that was false, that implicated him as having an affair. You have all these networks, ABC, CBS, George Stephanopoulos on Good Morning America, who were saying very nice things about him yesterday, and he deserves those nice things. But in 2008, he had the audacity to run against Barack Obama, and they just hammered him.
Right. They called him cranky. They called him this. They called him that. I mean, y'all point that out, and it's fascinating. The same people that lionize him today are the ones that turned on him 10 years ago.
Yeah, and that is just going to be true of any Republican nominee for president. And I think it's important that Republicans know this, because media, they're not your friend, and they may act as though they're your friend if you're criticizing another Republican or something like that. But once John McCain was the nominee and a threat to Barack Obama becoming president, he became the enemy, and these same people just turned on him in an instant.
Well, and they seem to be using McCain's death as another way to go after President Trump and really to blame John McCain for the rise of President Trump.
Yeah, well, what we've seen a lot in the obituaries and reflections on John McCain is they've been going after Sarah Palin. That Sarah Palin is the worst thing that he possibly did. Sarah Palin created the rise of Donald Trump, all these sorts of things. But yet they never forgave him for nominating a conservative vice presidential nominee, and they were constantly pressuring him to say he regretted it, that Sarah Palin was a terrible mistake. But that's really one of the things that we've seen again and again. And really, we should be reflecting on his life and his sacrifice and his military service, and to try and turn this into a way to attack other Republicans or other conservatives or go after Sarah Palin is just in very bad taste.
Well, and what they aren't revealing is that John McCain would have been dead in the water if he had picked Joe Lieberman. It would have been a 50-state route, and it was only Sarah Palin's appeal to the party's base, which has to be a first, where you have a nominee that didn't even appeal to his base, but without Palin, McCain could have been it could have been a huge blowout.
Right. Yeah, I think that's definitely true. We've seen that. So CBS, in one of their reflections yesterday, kind of lamented the fact that he didn't pick Joe Lieberman as his vice presidential nominee. Well, how would that have worked out? A lot of conservatives appreciate Joe Lieberman and when he stood up against Bill Clinton and so on, but he was not a conservative. He really wasn't even a moderate on most issues. He was pro-choice. And so, yeah, as you say, that would have depressed turnout and depressed the base. And I think that's something that conservatives have to remember. When liberal journalists try and give you advice, they don't have your best interest at heart. So suggesting that John McCain should have picked Joe Lieberman, that in no way would have helped, at least as far as the way I look at it.
Well, and Scott Whitlock joining us from Newsbusters. Kevin Miller here at KIDO Talk Radio, 107.5 FM, 580 AM. But, you know, we talk about Sarah Palin and John McCain, and John McCain was great for reaching across the aisle. It was within his own party that he had problems with. If you were Mitt Romney or someone he disagreed with, hell hath no fury like John McCain. He was passionate about his issues and didn't have a problem telling people about it.
He was, and I think when you look at John McCain and bipartisanship, I think that's another way of saying that the media is never going to request or demand that of Democrats. We never see journalists asking where are the pro-choice, where are the pro-life Democrats, where are the moderate Republicans? If anything, moderate Democrats get criticized. They get hammered for essentially kind of being sellouts. And we have let's take Beto O'Rourke in Texas, who's running against Ted Cruz. We've been covering that race, and we've been seeing a lot of praise for him, despite the fact that he is a very liberal Democrat running in conservative Texas. And you would think that if you wanted someone like that to win, you would encourage a moderate Democrat to run or get the nomination in Texas. But that's not what we're seeing. We're seeing them praise this liberal Democrat in Texas, which shows you that it's not about moderation and bipartisanship. That only works when we're talking about Republicans. When it's Democrats, they want just another liberal.
How have they turned this against the president?
You're talking about as far as John McCain?
Mm-hmm.
Well, look, obviously the two of them didn't get along. They didn't really have a good relationship. So anytime, personally, I don't think that the president handled it in the best way. He simply could have had the flags at half-mast. But anytime there's any kind of chance for something like that, when it comes to Donald Trump, they're going to try and use it against him. And that's what he needs to remember, is that they are always going to do that, and you have to, you have to put your best foot forward. And in this case, I don't think he did, and they immediately exploited it to make it look as though that Donald Trump was going after a dead person and didn't appreciate his military service to the country. That's how they're trying to spin it, as opposed to John McCain and Donald Trump didn't agree with each other in politics.
What do you make of the recent move by the media that it's all Mueller all the time? Never mind, good old Lanny said he made it up, or he's backtracking, being the source of this meeting where Trump knew about what was going on with the Russians in Trump Tower. It's all so confusing, and then Lanny Davis happens to be the attorney for Michael Cohen. It's crazy time here, it seems.
It is, and I think you raise a great point, because that shows the hypocrisy of the media. Look, for anyone old enough to remember the 90s or Bill Clinton, they showed great skepticism of Ken Starr's investigation into Bill Clinton, into Whitewater, into Monica Lewinsky. They were constantly questioning whether he was some sort of right-wing hack. And the way we look at the MRC is we're not asking for partisanship. We're not asking for conservative bias. We're asking for fairness. And so if you're going to show skepticism to an investigation to a Democratic president, show skepticism into an investigation into a Republican president. And instead, what we've seen is nothing but praise for Robert Mueller, no sort of skepticism as for the investigation itself, for the integrity of the investigation. And yeah, the Lonnie Davis thing, that's a great point too, because when those allegations and the things he originally said came out, they all hyped it, and then the sort of backtracking by Davis, there was nothing. They didn't seem to care that it was, I might have been not quite telling the truth about that. They only care about anything that can promote this investigation and kind of lead to some sort of inevitable impeachment inquiry against Donald Trump. That's the goal out of all of this when it comes to the liberal media.
Right, which is strange. They're making the news instead of reporting it.
Yeah, exactly. And we did a study that took last Wednesday as an example, where we looked at all the cable shows on MSNBC and all the cable shows on CNN to see how often they were talking about impeachment. And this is in one day, mind you. It was 222 instances on MSNBC and CNN. So they are going full tilt with this. Again, unlike with the Clinton investigation, there's no sort of skepticism about it. There's just, I would describe it as excitement, really. They are very excited about this concept, about the possibility.
Scott Whitlock joining us from Newsbusters at the Media Research Center. Kevin Miller here at KIDO Talk Radio. So what else should we be looking forward to, Scott, this week with the McCain coverage and the slights against Palin and Donald Trump?
Well, I think it's going to the coverage as we get through the memorial services and the funeral. they're going to do what they've done before, which is try and play up McCain's differences with the base, with conservatives, and they're going to be hypocritical about it because, again, as we said, a lot of these people want to praise John McCain, and he deserves praise, but these same people in 2008, they said the worst sorts of things about him. And I should also say 2008 wasn't the only instance. When John McCain was supporting the troop surge in Iraq, there was all sorts of nasty coverage and mean things said about him. When he supported George W. Bush's reelection in 2004, the same thing. So anytime he wasn't being bipartisan or supporting a liberal position, if you will, they hammered him and they said horrible things about him and his service and kind of portrayed him as some cranky old man who may, have kind of flashbacks to Vietnam. We saw that in the New Yorker and other papers. So it's total hypocrisy, but all that's going to be swept under the rug, and they're just going to play up, John McCain is the last of the old Republicans, and he's the last who stood up to people like Donald Trump. I think that's what we're going to see for the next week.
Well, Scott, we appreciate it. Thank you very much. If people want more information, how can they get a hold of you?
Sure, they can go to newsbusters.org, and we're going to have a lot of stuff on how they cover this McCain story, how they continue to cover Mueller, and you can just find that at newsbusters.org.
Scott, thank you. Have a great day.
Thanks for having me on.
Kevin Miller in the morning here, KIDO Talk Radio. Phone number is 580-5436, 580-KIDO. So we've been talking recently about marijuana, and many people disagree with me about the move to legalize marijuana in the state. So in California, and let's face it, what goes on in California eventually is coming to Idaho. You see the people, and again, for the good people coming from California, thank you. But we're not going to sit there and whitewash the news and say we're not being invaded. I'm starting to see more California plates on my way into work than I'm seeing Idaho plates. Now, maybe that's a little stretch, but 1 out of every 4 plates are from California, it seems. And I don't understand why the people from California keep their license plates. You move to Idaho, you take advantage of our lower cost of living, and what? You want to stick it in our face that you're still Californians at heart. That's my own opinion. 580-5436, 580-KIDO. So there's a new vaping explosion going on in California. Apparently, though, this is not a good thing when we're talking about just the safety of vaping itself.
Ray Manis now has a large first-degree burn on his left leg. But how it happened is something the 22-year-old Splendora man never expected. It was actually this battery for his electronic cigarette vaporizer that exploded in his pants pocket.
Out of nowhere, my pocket it sounded like a CO2 cartridge spraying out, right?
Complicating an already scary situation, he was driving with coworkers in a rental vehicle at the time. The floorboard caught on fire before a man is pulled over and kicked the burning battery out of the vehicle. John Robinson, the owner of the Vapor Lair on Westheimer, has heard stories of exploding batteries before.
I'm always bummed about it. When I hear that, all I think is somebody's not doing their job.
Chris Stipes, Fox News.
All right, Chris, thank you very much. So be careful about the vaping. And then you've got this situation with marijuana in California. We talked about it earlier last hour, and it was concerning mothers, and it was concerning breastfeeding. That's right, breastfeeding. And apparently, according to a recent study, you've got folks in California that are breastfeeding their kids, and because there's some THC in the breast milk, the kids are getting that addictive quality coming from pot. And it just goes to show you that there are more things that are going on with this nefarious weed than the proponents will tell us. And look, I simply support Brad Little. I support everybody else that says, not in Idaho. You want the stinky weed? Go to Oregon. You want the stinky weed? Go to Colorado. Your call's next. Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio.
I mean, there is the question about John Kerry, but I think now that John McCain has sunk his teeth in, he's made it about presidential authority. And frankly, it's outrageous that there is this witch hunt going on the right about these people of color, let's face it, around this president. Eric Holder, Valerie Jarrett, now Susan Rice, before it was Van Jones. This is not about who is hawkish in the same way John McCain is about foreign policy, because if you look at Iran and Libya, Susan Rice checks those boxes. This is a personal vendetta.
So you think McCain is being McCain and people like Lindsey Graham, McCain, who had his own daughter attacked, or he was accused of having an illegitimate child when he in fact adopted a young girl from South Asia. You're saying that McCain's being driven by racial prejudice here?
There is no other way to look at this, because look at her foreign policy. And by the way, look at what John McCain said about Condi Rice's nomination. We're running this story on the front page of the MSNBC website right now. Back then, 8 years ago, John McCain said the people, the Democrats who were questioning Condi Rice's credentials, they were just engaged with bitterness. They needed to move on. Why has he changed his tune? What is it about Susan Rice? And the answer is there aren't any good foreign policy explanations for it.
And there we have it. Richard Wolff, at one time from Newsweek, then at MSNBC, talking about John McCain being a racist. Wonder what Richard Wolff is saying about John McCain today. Good morning. You're listening to 107.5 FM, 580 AM. Kevin Miller in the morning. Mike Tracy joins us now. Mike, good morning.
Good morning, Kevin. I loved your last guest. I've got a really great example of what he was talking about, how Republicans are treated here in Idaho. One of our good friends and one of the most honest men in politics that I've ever worked with is our state treasurer, Ron Crane, who I've had the good pleasure to work with for years, was attacked by Associated Press about 6 years ago. And Todd Dvorak was the bureau chief at the time. John Miller was the reporter. And somebody in Legislative Services office was leaking improper information illegally about what was going on in the state treasurer's office, which was nothing, but they were leaking confidential bank information and all kinds of other things to Associated Press and John Miller. And John used that and fabricated stories to make Ron Crane look like a crook. And John Miller no longer lives in the United States. He moved to Switzerland. Todd Dvorak let him get away with it. And then when Todd lost his job at Associated Press, he went to work for the Attorney General, Lawrence Wasden. And unfortunately for Todd Dvorak, he lost his job with Lawrence Wasden because he got caught trying to take pot and pot paraphernalia into an airport in Spokane. And now he works for a consulting firm. But Ron Crane had the trifecta against him. He was a conservative, Republican, Christian, all three. Republican, conservative, Christian.
And I remember John Miller, and let me just say this, and we have our own little folks here in the Gem State, and you've battled them for years, Mike, Mr. Popke. One can never forget his agenda against everyone that it was.
Every Republican,
every conservative, Mr. Popke. I don't forget. Maybe others do.
He spent his entire career going after Larry Craig.
He did.
And trying to destroy Larry Craig's career. He spent his entire career trying to destroy Republicans. And guess who he works for now?
I know who he works for.
Yeah.
Congressman
I wonder
Labrador.
how he got that job. Yeah, exactly. Congressman Labrador. Boy, isn't that an interesting twist of fate?
You know, I often wondered, and Mike Tracy, you don't have a problem going on dangerous ground, so here we go. See, to me, Dan Popke going to work for Congressman Labrador, if Dan Popke were around, he would have questioned that, because the coverage on Congressman Labrador for the last 2 or 3 years of the Popke administration really went from aggressive to glowing.
Yes.
In my opinion.
Yeah, he wasn't. There was
and
nobody questioned it. The Statesman didn't have a pit bull anymore. Their pit bull, who spent 27 years at the Idaho Statesman attacking Republicans over and over and over again for nearly 3 decades, was no longer there. So now he worked for one of the most conservative Republicans in the delegation, if not the most conservative. And he wasn't. Now all of a sudden he was defending a man who was a conservative Christian Republican,
a man who he aggressively went after for years. And what I'm wondering is, Mike Tracy, I'm thankful that I get to ask you this question. Where were the people at that bastion of truth, the Idaho Statesman, questioning their little pit bull going across the aisle? They celebrated it. No one said, isn't this a conflict of interest?
Exactly. Well, what I had when he went to work for Raul, I had hundreds of people call me and say, "What's going on, Mike? You've had to deal with this guy for 30 years, ever since he came into the state in 1987. And what's going on?" And I said, "I have no idea, other than the Statesman probably couldn't afford his salary anymore because of budget cuts, and he had to look for a job somewhere else. And this probably was the only place he could get a job that paid decent money." And that's speculation on my part, but Dan was very dishonest in his coverage of Larry Craig and very dishonest in his coverage of Republicans for decades. And all he did was spend his 27 years at the Idaho Statesman attacking Republicans over and over and over again. And I'll be very frank here, because it was public record. 5 years ago, I made a mistake and I got a DUI. And since then, I quit drinking. And the only person who wrote about it in the state of Idaho was Dan Popke. The only person. He attacked me personally.
I would agree with you on that.
He was the only person. And I even had some of my liberal friends in the media tell me that was the worst piece of yellow journalism they had ever seen.
I still, to this day, don't know why he was hired by Congressman Labrador.
Exactly.
I don't know. Mike Tracy, I appreciate your truth-telling. I've got to run, but thank you.
Talk to you later.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Traffic and weather together, KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, Dave. And more of your phone calls next. Kevin Miller, 107.5 FM, 580 AM, KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, Doug. And don't forget, Glenn Beck today at 9, Dave Ramsey before Sean, and after Sean Hannity, the one, the only, Lars Larson. Kevin Miller here, taking your phone calls about the issues that matter to you at 580-5436, 580-KIDO. Don't forget, Wednesday through Sunday, it's the Spirit of Boise Balloon Classic, once again, at Ann Morrison Park, brought to you by CapEd Credit Union. Going to be just a terrific time. Hope you can get out there, whether it's Wednesday, whether it's Thursday, Friday for the night glow, or Saturday and Sunday. I know so many people are excited to see the balloons, and KIDO Talk Radio and Town Square Media proud to bring it to you once again with our partners at CapEd Credit Union. Rachel Sutherland joining us from Fox News Radio, live from Capitol Hill. Rachel, good morning.
Hey, good morning, Kevin.
Rachel, let's talk a little bit about America and Mexico. Apparently, all is well that ends well.
Well, at least at this point, the president yesterday in the Oval Office announcing a bilateral, what he calls United States-Mexico trade agreement. So at this point, Canada not involved in this agreement. It would require that 75% of car parts are made in North America, and that I believe about 45% of workers would receive $16 or more an hour. So really it sounds like almost like a victory for labor unions. However, this is just really the first step, because any kind of trade agreement would have to be approved by Congress, and NAFTA still remains in place. Even though the president says he doesn't want to call it that anymore, there would have to be a 90-day notice given of any kind of intent to leave NAFTA. So the president also putting pressure on Canada to come to the table and start negotiations on more like a trilateral agreement, and has said if they don't, that this doesn't get worked out, that he's going to slap car tariffs on them. So that's kind of a new one. So my understanding is Canada's foreign minister has been rushing to come to the table to start these discussions.
Well, and you got to give it to the president. As soon as this deal gets worked out with the Mexican government, he's already all about, Canada. And if he can get this deal done, certainly we saw the markets blow up yesterday, and the president taking credit for that, blowing up in a good way. Couldn't imagine if we had a new deal with Canada, what the reaction would be as well.
Right. I think the Dow went over 800 points, something like a new record. And so definitely some good signs in the stock market. But we have to kind of wait and see what does Canada do. And in a way, we're kind of up against the clock, in that the government in Mexico is getting ready to make a change with Peña Nieto leaving office and a fellow affectionately referred to as AMLO there a populist as well, taking office there here in just a few months. So I think that Mexico, the current administration, is moving quickly on this. Canada, I don't know that maybe the threat of tariffs will move them more quickly, but this has been going on with negotiations back and forth for more than a year. But time is of the essence, too, because the House does flip into Democratic hands, come January after the midterms, then you're looking at a situation where the president may have a tougher time getting Congress to sign off on a new trade deal.
Indeed, of course, the big Lanny Davis bombshell. I'm sure a lot of people will be reacting to that as they did last night and today, and what it means for the Mueller investigation, Michael Cohen. Do you think Congress is going to do anything as far as the people's work, or are we all going to speculate on the special prosecutor now until the midterms?
I think we'll just be speculating about what Bob Mueller is going to be doing. I think it's interesting that Lanny Davis, who is the attorney for Michael Cohen, who has flipped on President Trump, has said that he was a source for a CNN story that purported that the president knew about that 2016 Trump Tower meeting before it happened. The president denies that. What Lanny Davis was saying is that Michael Cohen told him that he saw Donald Trump Jr. talking to his dad about that meeting, but that's awfully, in court they would say that's hearsay. So I know the same burdens don't have to necessarily be met with journalism, but the fact that Lanny Davis has now kind of walked that back and said he cannot independently verify what Michael Cohen had to say. So that was a bit of a complicated one. I'm not sure how much of an impact it'll have moving forward on the Mueller probe. We know that today that Bruce Orr, who is the Justice Department official who's been linked to that anti-Trump dossier, is at this moment behind closed doors with a couple of committees that want to know about his relationship with Christopher Steele. Now, he's the one that helped put together that dossier. So that's going on as well.
I know. It's so difficult to keep up with. Rachel, we appreciate you. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, Rachel Sutherland joining us here, KIDO Talk Radio. Kevin Miller in the morning, taking your calls about a few issues, most notably the lionization of John McCain. And John McCain, a war hero, a congressman, a senator, a statesman. But on the other hand, McCain was a street fighter. I love the press. We talked about this yesterday in the Miller Minute, where the press is saying that he was all about civility. You ever get in a fight with John McCain? It was not good. It was not good for conservative Republicans. And the hypocrisy of the press when they sit back and talk about, he reached across the aisle. Well, he did that at the weakness of the Tea Party. He did that at the weakness of Sarah Palin and Donald Trump. Now, the person closest to him, Lindsey Graham, had this to say on Fox and Friends earlier this morning. And remember, when you hear Fox News on the radio, you hear it everywhere. There is one station that is your Fox News station, and that is KIDO Talk Radio.
Senator John McCain.
Yep.
There were some things that you wanted to tell us here today on the Kirby Couch about the last couple of days and what's to come in the next week.
I've been a basket case to all the friends that I have who reached out to me. Thank you. It means a lot to me, to the family. John had 7 kids, a bunch of grandkids, and a lovely wife. All the tributes to John really matter. I appreciate getting the flag down and the president saying something nice. If I had to pick one person to explain America to someone from another planet, it would be John. He could answer the question, who are these Americans? Yeah. Along with Mark Salters, the most eloquent expression of what America's about came from John's lips. He was my mentor, he was my friend, and I feel a real obligation to send him off well and to continue the legacy.
And if you saw him a couple of weeks ago, what was the last thing he said to you?
I have not been cheated.
I have not been cheated. What did he mean?
That he'd lived the life beyond any imagination that he had at 17. So I'm going to talk on the Senate. An after-action report is common in the military when a mission's complete or an operation is over. Lessons learned. From the time he was 17 until he passed away a couple of days ago, what are the lessons learned from this man's life? I was in Vietnam with him. We went to the Hanoi Hilton. It's a museum. We're the bad guys in that museum, by the way. So you go to his cell, and he's looking in, and you can tell his memory is going really quick, very nostalgic. And there are photos all over the wall of the prisoners sitting in chairs with sunglasses and playing volleyball. And all of our minders are there with us. And I said, John, this doesn't seem so bad. And he smiled and he says, I don't remember it this way.
Yeah, a little bit of a different story.
Because we had to get out of Vietnam, right?
You have a life, live it. He lived it.
God, yes. Live it, don't be afraid, and make your mistakes and move on.
There we have it. Lindsey Graham on Fox and Friends on KIDO Talk Radio, remembering his friend John McCain. 580-5436, 580-KIDO. Earlier this morning, we were talking about a situation in California involving marijuana and breast milk.
Marijuana's mind-altering ingredient, THC, was found in breast milk during a small study. While solid evidence is lacking, experts say the THC has chemical properties that could allow it to disrupt brain development and potentially cause harm. The new study involved 50 nursing mothers using pot who provided breast milk samples to researchers at the University of California, San Diego. Lab testing found a small amount of THC, the chemical that causes the high, in 34 of 54 samples, up to 6 days after samples were provided. Cannabidiol, another form of THC, was found in 5 samples. Ann Carrick, Fox News.
So, in a state where marijuana is legal, now we have pregnant mothers smoking the pot and passing it on to their kids. How wonderful that is. Of course, the purveyors of trying to make pot legal here will tell me that I'm off my perennial rocker. I don't agree with that. And by the way, drugfreeidaho.org, I urge you to go there to watch Chronic State. It is fascinating. I've watched a little of it. We shared it with you yesterday of what really happens when a state legalizes marijuana. The consequences that our pro-pot Politburo press is not, they're not disclosing with us. Imagine that, the press not telling us the truth. So here we have it now where we have pot in breast milk. Never mind the munchies. Now we've got it in the breast milk. Something has to be done, and simply people have to have the common sense to say no. I think this is, again, another warning sign that the federal government needs to come in once again and say enough. We're not the United States of Canada. We're the United States of America, where laws and consequences matter. And when people say pot is harmless, how can you explain that where a young mother, remember, when mothers used to smoke during pregnancy, well, you can't smoke anymore, you can't drink anymore, and apparently you can't smoke pot anymore. Who in their right mind would be smoking pot while pregnant or after having a kid? Oh, it helps them with the pain. It helps them with a lot of things, I suppose, but it's not helpful or healthful to the children. Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio.
A group of NFL owners in New York Monday to meet with representatives from the NFL Players Association to discuss the ongoing issues surrounding protests. L.A. Chargers offensive lineman Russell Okung is among those in attendance, he revealed on Twitter. And Okung plans to show owners video of Texas Senate candidate Beto O'Rourke explaining why he believes there is nothing wrong with kneeling during the national anthem.
I can think of nothing more American than to peacefully stand up or take a knee for your rights.
The NFL announced this offseason that players would be required either to stand during the anthem or stay in the locker room. After that policy came under criticism, the league said there would be conversations with the players' union about crafting a better policy. Matt Napolitano, Fox News.
When will they ever learn? Right? When will they ever learn? People that watch the NFL, people that watch college football, they love America. And you can have some obscure Senate candidate from Texas or Massachusetts or California, and they can espouse their liberal dogma. But it's still not going to change the fact that people that watch the NFL do not want you to insult the United States of America. Sure, you can prove your point, but as we've talked about for years, people that drive delivery vehicles or people in uniform, people that are there, in the office, in the workplace, on the cruise, you can't sit there and protest during your work hours. You're an employee. NFL players have to understand that they're no different from anyone else. And if they continue to try to justify this ridiculous, this absurdity, this disrespect of America, they're going to see their bank accounts take a hit, just like league owners have already seen attendance going down, sponsorship dollars drying up, and basically how they're killing the golden goose of professional football. Tea Party Bob joins us now on KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Mr. Miller. How are you today?
Not bad, not bad. And you?
Just feeling very perky. I notice I'm getting a little earlier every day until I get to that 6:30 mark.
You're perky.
I just wanted to say it's a real shame that the progressive liberal media have to take such a solemn occasion like the death of Senator John McCain and turn it into a three-ring circus by going after President Trump. You know, I've never been a fan of John McCain because of his left-leaning politics, but that doesn't mean that the left should have a free rein on linking him to anything negative said about him to our president. There should be a certain amount of respect for a war hero who has been subjected to the unbelievable torture that John McCain received while in captivity in Vietnam. Now, here's a man who had an opportunity to get released 3 years early before the other prisoners because his father was an admiral and refused to do so and stayed in while the other prisoners were there until they were released. The media making such a big deal about raising and lowering the flag for McCain's death is just another way to attack the president. Many of us don't remember that John McCain was a member of the Gang of Eight and trying to get the comprehensive immigration bill through, which would have meant giving millions of illegal immigrants a path to citizenship. Trump and McCain had an ongoing feud ever since Trump declared that he wasn't a hero during the 2016 campaign. The real vindictiveness of McCain could be seen when he gave the thumbs down in getting rid of Obamacare, which is why we're still stuck with many of the aspects of that. It's time to give John McCain the respect he deserves for being an American warrior and for his service to his country, and allow him to rest in peace. And by the way, I did watch your video on Chronic Idaho. Although I found much of it very viable, there were many aspects when they spoke about CBD oil that the people speaking really had no idea of what they were talking about and had done little or no recent research on the subject matter. I have never been for the legalization of marijuana as a recreational drug, as you occasionally try to paint me. But I am for the legalization of CBD oil for medical
Now, when
purposes.
have I ever tried to paint you that way?
2 days ago.
How?
By continuing to say that I'm for legalization.
You're for legalization of CBD oil.
That's correct. But you make it sound like I'm for legalization of marijuana.
I think you're a little oversensitive.
No, I'm not. I think you're a little oversensitive.
Yeah, that's fair.
Great show again, as usual.
Well, it was nice talking to you.
By the way, are you going to be down at the Balloon Festival?
I will be.
Oh, good. It'll give me an opportunity to come down and visit again.
Of course, it will be tough. Most of the time, it's during the show.
I understand.
See, if you would do your research, you would know that.
I asked you 2 weeks ago if you were going to be there, and you weren't sure.
Well, again, we're committed to the program, but we're going to do our very best.
All right. Look forward to it, my friend.
And do you.
Have a great day.
All right. Tea Party Bob doesn't take no for an answer. He likes the balloons. Let's get you to work safely and on time. KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, Dave.
7's Eric Gabbard.
Back to the phones. Jared in Nampa with Kevin Miller on KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, Jared.
Hey, so I drive to Ontario a lot, and funniest thing ever, they're planning on putting a new unit in place for marijuana use to get rid of all the illegal marijuana that's been massively growing over there, and it's going to cost their state over $700,000 to put in a unit specifically to fight marijuana and illegal use of marijuana. So, I mean, we can say that it'll be a good thing. We can say that it's not going to cost us a whole bunch, that our city's going to make a whole bunch of money out of it. But, man, as you go further and further down the line, it just continues and continues to be more and more of a problem. And I just think people keep lying to themselves. And, you know, I want to say that there are people that do recognize that there are good things about marijuana. And, yes, there may be good qualities. But you got to take it in a full picture span. You can't just take it by one point. You got to go by all points.
I agree, Jared. The idea that the press doesn't cover the enormous cost to the state, they're not doing anybody a disservice. They're doing everybody a disservice.
Oh yeah, I mean, who would know that even in Ontario, they fight for the legal. Even though they fight the legalization of marijuana, they openly admit that it's addictive to kids between the age of, or up to the age of, I think, of 23. It's an addictive substance that 1 in 5 kids become addicted to. So, I mean, like, they're being forced to admit the hard truths now